Look with me starting in verse 34. As the people in Cornelius' home waited anxiously for Peter's message, Luke writes, "So Peter opened his mouth and said, truly I understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him." What we see here in these verses is simply a good overarching summary of what Peter had learned from God over those past 4 days. And in essence, Peter explains that if God will allow people from every nation to receive grace through faith in Jesus, then Peter could no longer justify the reasons that he had been using for separating himself from the Gentiles. To put it even more clearly than that, if God doesn't play favorites, then how can we, right? And Peter's answer is, we can't. The reality of the new covenant through Jesus is that everyone, anyone, all the people of the earth should be given the chance to hear the good news about Jesus, which by extension means that anyone who is given the opportunity to hear has the potential to believe and to be saved. And we can see just how radical, how shocking this truth was when we look at what happened in verse 45. After Peter tells Cornelius and his family about Jesus, we see that God sends the Holy Spirit upon these Gentiles, just as he had already done for the Jews at Pentecost and just as he had already done for the Samaritans. And because of this, verse 45 says, "And the believers from among the circumcised who had come with Peter," meaning those other Jews who were watching all of this unfold, "were amazed because the gift of the Holy Spirit was poured out even on the Gentiles." Now you can kind of hear it there in Luke's words, can't you? These Jews were astonished because not only was God's grace extended to the Jews and to the Samaritans who were technically half Jewish, but it was also available to be received by those who weren't Jewish by ethnicity at all. In our Wednesday night Bible study this past Wednesday, as we're studying through the book of Romans, we read in chapter 2, verses 28 through 29, we read this, "For no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, nor is circumcision outward and physical, but a Jew is one inwardly, and circumcision is a matter of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter." The point that Paul was making here in his letter to the Romans completely supports the conclusion that Peter had just come to at Cornelius' house. God's people are not God's people because of their ethnicity or because of their outward qualities. What makes someone one of God's people is a heart that repents of its sin and places faith in Jesus for salvation. Therefore, God shows no partiality based on external characteristics. And thus, anyone in the world who hears the gospel has the opportunity to be saved.